Hello there, it's time for some more of the Abridged campaign for 3K Total War. Last time we took out the field army under Han's sway, then we moved on to overcome his defences in Jincheng's small city, and then we went on to basically finish his faction off by defeating the last of his advisors and troops. We're on the verge of completely conquering Jincheng, but just before that we've now ambushed Zhang back near our starting position with our second army. Things are going to get started right away because we're deploying right next to the enemy line by virtue of it being an ambush. So here we go, we're just going to run right at them. The issue that I mentioned last time is that our troops are worse than theirs, so we really have to get the most out of our surprise attack advantage. In some cases it's okay, like our swords here fighting with the enemy spearmen. I think that's an okay matchup. And as we saw, we've got many troops charging into enemy archers who are exposed in the column, so we can quickly take down guys who are weak in melee and stop them getting any ranged fire on us. That's all good stuff, and our general's cav are especially good for that. The issue will be when things like their sword units are fighting my peasant spears. Those will be unfavourable melees for us. There goes another spear unit. And the other issue is things like their heavy cav general, who will just work their way through the swordsmen currently holding the front of the enemy column. That's a dodgy situation. Here's a nice situation. Our peasant bows are shooting into the back of the enemy swords to support our spearmen. I thought this would be better than it actually is. It's just that the peasant bowmen suck, so we're not wiping them out or anything, but it's probably going to be better than just the peasant spears fighting on their own. The enemy's medium cav have been chased away by some of our peasants. That's very good news. At the front, things are starting to falter as the enemy spears and the general are just about finishing off our swordsmen, so that's going to become a bit of a crisis point. But we have routed one of their generals in the centre. Somehow our peasant spears had so much of a bonus against cav that we defeated the sentinel cav. Not quite sure how that even happened. Now to seal the deal in this area along the centre of the column, our general Shu He comes in to smash the back of the enemy spears. This is a bit of an all-or-nothing gamble, because if they don't rout, our cav will then be in big trouble, especially because the enemy's cav encircle me at the same time. Luckily those spears do rout and the enemy cav wander off elsewhere. Their secondary general comes back from routing, but my secondary general has just finished chasing down some unit, so they'll keep each other in check outside of the battle. At the front of the column, things are finally broken down. My archers are out of ammo and are now just trying to not get engaged by the enemy's melee troops. I'm using my last few arrows on the archers further down the line to try and kill those spears, but it's just not that effective because these archers do suck. And many of my melee troops are starting to go. We can see our guys just have sticks and no armour. They're really barely troops at all. It's the lowest of the low, perhaps the worst unit in the game in fact. And we're now committing our archers into melee as well. I guess peasant archers in melee are even worse than peasant spearmen, but we are throwing them into cases where the enemy are just routing, so we'll use them to chase enemies away. Here's another bad situation. The enemy get a downhill charge that takes out one of my key sword units, one of my actual units that can actually hold on for more than a few moments in melee. But things overall going well. The balance bar has been gradually trending in our favour as the enemy units further down the column rout and are then very slowly killed while routing by our inferior units. I presume the enemy have some sort of morale debuff going on because it's an ambush, not sure how big it is. But it's enough that just spamming the enemy with a ton of peasant archers in melee eventually gets the job done. They give up on those fights even if they might have actually come out on top in the very end. The enemy general runs away, and over the course of like 20 seconds the balance bar just completely shifts to be in our favour. It's a chain rout and a close victory for our side. We lost perhaps just under a third of our men in that battle, but the enemy lost like 80–90%, so we've definitely got this one. Perhaps even it was more than a close victory once again, and we will recruit the prisoners to make it not so bad for us. Plus, our losses were trash infantry who probably replenish real fast. Overall then, this ambush was perfect really, because not only did we annihilate the enemy army for ultimately negligible losses, but we end up with a great strategic situation. Zhang is now standing outside of the Hanzhong small town, or large town, sorry. And that means when we go to finish him off, the garrison of the town will be drawn out, and we can take them out without having to worry about towers or anything in a settlement assault. The balance bar's pretty even because our force is still trash, and the enemy's low numbers are still counterbalanced by their quality, so we'll need to do this one manually. In a rare twist, the replay for this battle just crashed the game, so we're going to look at the live footage for once. My strategy was just to have my peasant archers stand out in front and shoot at the enemy army. The enemy archers will probably kill my archers, but I don't mind because it's more important to take out enemy melee infantry to make sure the enemy's melee advantage gets softened as much as possible before they arrive, and indeed we do take out a couple of units using our archers. Then we charge forward with the line and just get in there, and here if you look closely you'll see a really annoying glitch that I've had throughout the campaign, and that is every time you give an attack order, the cursor actually disappears for a few seconds, which makes it really hard to give more than one order in close succession. It's pretty much annoying for every battle, but we don't see it in this series because I am filming the replays. But this is my chance to get that out there and complain. I presume at some point it will be fixed. This campaign is, so far and for a while after this, filmed in the review code of the game, so it's not actually the release build, but presumably it's intended to be criticised because it is for review, so I will not hold back. Anyway, as for this battle, our cav goes out to kill those enemy archers at the back. Meanwhile, the fight has been relatively successful, routed a couple of units just with our sheer numbers, and by the time our cav come back, we will have sealed the deal. One other thing to mention, while we're doing some mini reviewing, is that I'm still not sure what happens if when a battle ends, you do what I do here. You just end the battle by claiming the victory and you don't chase down routing troops. I really don't know whether the developers intend you to chase down routing troops or whether they just get deleted. Sometimes they do in previous games, sometimes they don't. It depends on the situation. I think they did in this case, but I'm not exactly looking carefully at the numbers. And usually, to save my own time and sanity, I don't bother playing rout phases as a rule. So we totally wiped out the enemy army. Our losses were negligible, and that means in the very same turn we can take a few steps forward and auto-resolve the one or two guys who were left over in the garrison to capture the town as well, and with that, Zhang Lu's faction is destroyed, although it's not called Zhang Lu anymore because he died and someone else took over at the last second, and your faction is only named after your faction leader rather than having a name unto itself. So that's that. Taking a look around at the territories nearby, we can see that to get the rest of Hanzhong Commandery, we have to get a territory on the other side of those mountains, so that's geographically inconvenient. Not going to bother with that for now. What we are going to do is defeat another faction. We need to take out the rest of Han Sui's faction, and Gong was already in position to do that from the last part, so we just auto-resolve a few survivors and move on in to complete our capture of the Jincheng Commandery. All very good. Now, looking around the situation here, we're still surrounded by enemies, but a lot of the territories around us, like the Wu-Wei Commandery and the Anding Commandery, are controlled by the Han Empire faction, the generic pro-emperor faction, I suppose. Now, we could go around and capture all those places, which would put our flank up against the edge of the map, a really good strategic situation to be in. However, not only is that kind of boring, because I think it will be quite easy, but I spotted another potential way to do this. When I moused over the Emperor down in Chang'an, it says that controlling him not only makes the Han Empire your vassal, but allows you to buy the other Han Empire territories into your own faction. So, from now on, my campaign objective will be to take the capital, which I think could be an interesting challenge, and if it all works as intended, we'll be securing our borders and gaining a whole load of territory as well in a much faster fashion than I would otherwise do. There is going to be another strategic concern going forwards, and that is Liu Zhang, the guy controlling the territory to the south of Wudu, our starting area. He has now joined the war against us, so we are at war in all directions now, and we'll need to adjust accordingly. With Gong here, I'm going to start the march towards Chang'an, and I'm going to try the forced march stance, or just march stance it's called here. But it doesn't quite work in the same way as in previous games, where you could move a bit, then activate Force March to go a bit further. Here, you do need to activate it before you actually start moving for the turn to get the extra movement points, which probably is more realistic, but I just didn't realise in this case. We're going to do it correctly here, to start moving Shu He and our trash stack to go to the west. He's going to be our defence against Liu Zhang, since if he just declared war on us, he might actually have an army and attack us soon. And while we could also be attacked at Hanzhong from the east, I'm going to fortify it by turning it into a city and just generally hope that we can defend that area. Now, while Gong is travelling, I linked him up with some more reinforcements who I recruited in front of him. But here's a case where the friendship system is screwing us over. This new guy leading these troops apparently doesn't like either Gong or Zhang Kai, our other commanders. and you get a debuff in battle for having people who aren't friends together. Because of that, I ended up splitting off the new army I've recruited, and it's going to act as a bit of an independent, annoying force, just going to send it over the border into enemy territory and liberate and raid, much in the same way that I did with Zhu He at first, just to see what they can do. And Gong will just have to recruit someone else to join his force. I did want to try and actually get a full stack together before we go up against the capital itself. Fortunately, there was Gong Yu'e on there, who is able to join the force without causing any drama in the ranks, and that will be fine. Once the army is ready, we'll start moving towards our objective. And on the way, we're going to be moving towards Hanzhong, so actually, we are going to get that chance to complete the Hanzhong commandery by chance. We can actually move there right now because of Gongdu's insane movement range, so we might as well. On the way, I'm trying to be careful to get some vision on what's in front of us in case there's a big army there or something, but it's only a very small army that's not close enough to the town to reinforce, so we can actually just storm in like this and go for it right now. This is pretty much an auto-resolve, but I'm going to fight it because I was looking at the enemy army and noted that everything they have is weak against cavalry. It's the same case we saw in the very first battle in this series, so I thought maybe we can do this with minimal casualties if I just do it manually. And I was feeling really cheeky for this one, because actually the enemy does have a little settlement with defense towers and everything, but I thought let's just do it anyway. I'm just going to charge the enemy with cav and see what happens. There are 4 entrances to the enemy settlement and we're going to hit them all at once. Gongdu's possibly got the hardest one here. He's charging against like 4 units of archers and 2 towers, but he just tanks all of the arrows and smashes into the swordsmen defending the entrance, and they lose about 75% of their men in mere seconds. Cavalry charges are very powerful. The archers are then close enough that they're drawn into melee, which is absolutely perfect. Meanwhile, Zhang is trying the same thing at another entrance. It was a bit slower because I guess his stats are lower or whatever. Our regular cav are doing it here at the west entrance, and at the east entrance our skirmish cav are doing it. This is the cheekiest one of all because we don't really have the stats to just charge in and bust through all of these enemies, but we're going to try anyway. And because we're fighting a night battle like I usually do, the enemy are debuffed, so we're going to have some leeway here. I feel like if you did this in a normal situation or on anything above normal difficulty where the enemy morale and combat stats are buffed, this probably wouldn't work. But here, in this perfect situation, we can do the cheekiest possible strategy and generally get away with it. Some of the entrances were putting up more resistance than others, as you can see. The attack from the west was a lot of trash units and our inexperienced new general, so it didn't go that well. But after a while, everything just chain routed, and that's going to be the end of that. So we stormed in with the minimum tactics strategy, and it did work out, and it's not even on romance mode where that sort of thing is supposed to work out. We lost like 300 men. We certainly could have got a better result with a better strategy, for example not sending the skirmish cav into melee, especially since we didn't even need to attack that gate. I just wanted to be maximum cheeky by attacking all the gates at once for no reason really. But it worked out in the end, I suppose, and we can add a new general to our pool, which is good because we might need to find someone else who's friends with someone else soon enough. It also says, by the way, that there's an estimated salary of 100 for adding someone to the pool, but I think what it really means is if you were to actually hire them and give them a job, you have to pay them a salary, so my paranoia that I was spending money just by having people hang around in court isn't founded, I don't think. With that Liu Zhang situation, I got my men to the border without incident, but nothing was happening, so I thought let's just keep going now that we've arrived. Doing my hyper-aggressive style, we'll move into enemy territory and see what they've got. I wanted to lay an ambush somewhere on the road here, but the terrain was bad, so I tried encamping instead. I guess that gives you some kind of defensive fortifications if the enemy do attack you, but in this case we didn't get to find out because nothing came, and indeed in the next turn I just kept walking down the road towards Liu Zhang's livestock farm here, and there's not much defending it, so we can storm on in. Not the best balance bar, but it would be too much meta effort in real life to actually do that battle correctly, so I take the auto-resolve and take the losses, nothing too bad, we'll replenish that in no time. I almost just sacked and got out of there because I thought maybe we can't even hold this territory. If the enemy come at us with units that have armor, for example, this trash stack would be useless. So I was thinking maybe we should just annoy the enemy by blowing their towns up or something. But in the end, as you can see, I occupied it, and now we're just going to sit here and see if anything happens. Liu Zhang has weird territory where someone else controls the middle of his main commandery, Chengdu, so that's probably not helping him attack us. He probably needs some complicated military access to move around freely. In the north, that guy who doesn't like Gong Du, Huanglang Fang Ping or something like that he was called, is going to slowly move into Anding Commandery. He was doing the Liberate thing to reduce enemy public order, but it's not very satisfying because you can't really see what effect it's having. So in the end I thought, let's just attack with a couple of units and see what happens. As for attacking Chang'an, we're now in range to do it, and we're ready to do it, but the city is defended by the legendary Lu Bu and a stack of actual troops, so it could be relatively hard to get in. Plus, because it's a big city, it's going to have all the towers and walls they could ever want. That means this isn't going to be as easy as I thought, which I suppose is what I was going for with this whole strategic move, so that's a good thing. What I decided to try was an ambush, because there was a forest near the enemy town that's on the road from Chang'an to the Hanzhong silk trader. So if the enemy want to go and take back their territory, they'll have to walk right by my ambush, I thought, and will potentially get the chance to overpower Lu Bu that way. Meanwhile up north, our little force approaches the Anding large town and finds it's only lightly defended. However, our attack is also very light, so we are going to struggle here. We have a slight advantage on the balance bar. I almost fought it right now, but I thought because things are kind of close and the enemy will have defensive towers which aren't represented on the balance bar, we need a bit more of an advantage. So I'm going to starve them out for a turn to see if any of the towers disappear or what have you. I eventually decided that after a long time thinking about it. We can only wait for one turn because we'll be out of supplies, and next turn at least it will be spring, so perhaps the debuffs you get for fighting in winter, if there even are any, haven't actually checked, won't be there. Anyway, so let's go to the next turn, where the main focus is that Lu Bu has snuck around Gong Du. There is another road just to the north that allows guys from Chang'an to get to Hanzhong, and indeed they have taken it, so they probably knew that my ambushing force was there and decided to just ignore it. Now then, do I attack Chang'an right now while Lu Bu is away, or do I go back to defend the silk trader? I notice here that my army is apparently roughly equal in power to his, so I thought this is actually a good opportunity to fight him, because if we defend the silk trader, we've already seen you get a couple of towers on your side, and I thought this might be enough to make that battle not too harrowing and give us a chance to bring down the legendary enemy warrior and destroy their army, and then take the capital at our leisure. But before any of that, we do have to jump back to this Huanglang Fang Ping guy with his tiny attack here at Anding, because we're about to run out of supplies. So let's go down and try to micro this one to victory. They've got a nice big town full of defensive towers, but the action will be taking place in this little corner since both sides only have a few men. Because the enemy have towers, and because we don't have very many men, we are in a bit of trouble. The towers stand to take out a decent portion of our force, a large proportion of it, because we don't really have men to lose. However, our yellow turban archer unit has the fire arrows ability, and as it turns out, much to my delight, things work in the same way that they work in Attila, where you can set a tower on fire using fire arrows, and then its health just gradually declines and you can leave it and it eventually collapses. We can even shoot a few arrows at the enemy. The enemy are getting out of there, by the way. They don't want to stand in range of my archers, which is clever of them. So we use fire to take out a couple of the towers. I then thought, can I shoot the rest of my arrows into the enemy spearmen to soften them up? But they've moved off somewhere else to defend another approach. And while I did think this was because they were trying to not get shot by my archers, it's actually for another reason. They thought I was going to send my general around through that other entrance, evidenced by the fact that when I drew him back over to the rest of my men, they switched strategy and they did send their spears to go and defend the approach that it looks like I'm going to attack. So it's not the case that you can range the enemy out of position. They will come and try to defend even if you do have arrows to shoot at them, which is good for my purposes here because I've got a few arrows left and I can kill more than half of the spears standing around here by just shooting at them. I did save a few arrows, but most of the shots do the damage here, and then once everything's looking nice and weak, we can go in with the swords. I'm not sure it's quite like in previous Total War games where swords were anti-spear units. I think in this game swords are considered to be anti-archer units and spearmen are considered generic melee units just like swords. So I don't know if this gives us any sort of bonuses fighting with them like that, but maybe it does, it doesn't really say. We are in range of the enemy archers, but they're not firing at us very efficiently because they're around a corner, and this unit that's just moved into range will now take the leftover arrows that I saved for just such an occasion. Plus, as they're shooting into the melee, they are shooting into the back of their own men pretty efficiently, so that's all good. And that leads to this. Both of the enemy spear units are broken by the combined pressure of already being half dead and us attacking them from the front. And our swordsmen do have a defense against arrows, so we can just charge through the enemy archer fire towards them. If it's anything like previous games, it's probably 50-40% defense against archery fire, where the arrows have that probability to not do any damage. So that's all good, and our cav charge in to take out the archers anyway. This very swiftly brings an end to the battle because the remaining enemy archers just gave up. A decisive victory, things worked out, and ultimately it was easier than I thought it would be because you can burn the towers. If we'd had to fight below the tower being shot by it the whole time, it might have been a very different story. Now, what shall we do with this town? This is a case where you could very strongly argue that just sacking it or looting it to take the money and going away is the best thing to do, because with our tiny force, defending this random area is going to be difficult and perhaps pointless. But I'm going to go with the Occupy anyway, because I'm just too much of a nice guy. I just don't want to be mean to the locals. And as we'll later see, having this random bit of territory be controlled, even with just a tiny force, eventually comes in really useful in a number of different ways. We discover, once we reveal the line of sight over the territory, that my earlier liberation actually did create a Yellow Turban rebellion here. The problem is the Yellow Turban rebels want to rebel against whoever's here, and now it's us, the guys who started their rebellion, but they don't care, so they're just treated as another faction. I mentioned this earlier, that Gong isn't treated as part of the Yellow Turban rebellion, so now we are going to have to fight the Yellow Turbans to hold on to this territory, which is really annoying, but that just appears to be what life is like. Anyway, we'll come back to this situation later, and of course we'll try to answer the question of what do you do about a threat like Lu Bu in the next part.